WNST.net. It is 52 weeks later already. It's Preakness week here. We don't have a Derby winner. We don't have Derby follow-ups, but we have the Derby crew. Randy Moss joins us from NBC and, of course, at the NFL Network, covering football in the time of the season that's football and the Triple Crown in this here time of the year. Randy, always good to have you back in Baltimore. Welcome back. I don't know how many more years we're going to be coming in here to Old Hilltop. We're continuing to make that debate, but certainly the strangest Preakness I can remember back to my youth when Spend a Buck didn't come to Baltimore. Not a good time for this to be happening for our race in our city right now. Probably not a good time for the horse racing industry the last 2 weeks with the Derby winner taken down. It's just been a strange couple of weeks.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of a different take on the aftermath of the disqualification. I've had more casual sports fans that have come up to me that have asked about the Kentucky Derby and my opinions on the disqualification. It captivated a lot of people. It really did. I mean, they were very interested in that whole thing and watching the replays and all the drama out on the track. If anything, I think that actually helps the sport. It really makes it more of a topic of conversation than it even usually would be. But obviously it doesn't help the sport when so many high-profile horses pass the second leg of the Triple Crown.
Well, 22 minutes, it felt like forever on a Saturday night, right? And look, you're there, you're involved in it, you're the pig in the meal. I was already watching, but I'm thinking, I was out on Facebook, I was out on Twitter, and let's just say you were somewhere and forgot the Derby was going on, but you sort of liked the Derby and whatever. In those 22 minutes when there was no answer, there were millions of people sucked into the story that didn't even watch the 2-minute race, right? So at that particular point, there was a little bit of an earthquake that happened that would not have happened had there been no inquiry and no wide turn, that it would have just been another Derby. It has made it a different kind of Derby, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I hadn't really thought about it this way, but I was just having a conversation about the aftermath of the Derby, about an hour ago. And with modern technology the way it is, I guess people that weren't even watching the Derby live as the race was run would get these notifications, these news alerts on their phone that there have been foul claims and all that. And you're right. I think that sucked people in then to go to the TV and say, what the heck's going on? So there were it was just a fascinating topic for a lot of casual sports fans out there that don't ordinarily follow horse racing that closely.
And they got the call wrong, right, Randy?
I think they got it right. I do. I think
here's where we go. It depends on what ticket you were holding or how you saw it. I just think in the Kentucky Derby, a horse has got to do a whole lot more than that. Especially a horse that was wire to wire and had that guy. No, they weren't going to beat that horse. And now, in the aftermath of all that, we're sitting here in Baltimore with, quite frankly, not a lot to talk about other than that and how maybe this sets up. But it's a completely different race, which, it always is a different race, but it usually includes the winner and some affirmed Aladar. And, bring me a little bit of that on here. We don't have any of that going on this week.
Well, let's go back to your statement there, because I have a lot of good friends who are horse players, who are students of the game, who have the same opinion that you do, that when the winner of the Derby, like Maximum Security, was the best horse, and when the horse that he interfered with, horses, plural, in my opinion, almost certainly weren't going to beat him anyway, then their opinion, sounds like yours, is that the horse should have been left up. But as you just said, your comment was the horse would have to do a whole lot more to get disqualified. What level, what would he have to do if a Derby winner was the best horse in your mind? What would he have to do to be disqualified?
I don't know how much further wide you'd want to turn, right? How much further out would create a foul? Is that what you're asking me?
Well, he came within a coin flip, essentially, of causing at least one and maybe multiple horses to go down on the track. Because at one point when he drifted out into the path of War of Will coming to the top of the stretch, as our NBC slow motion head-on camera showed, the hind legs of Maximum Security were intertwined with the front legs of War of Will behind him. War of Will's front legs were actually in between Maximum Security's hind legs for 2 different strides. That essentially makes it a coin flip that their legs get tangled, and if that happens at that speed, at that point on the racetrack, probably War of Will goes down, maybe even Maximum Security goes down. And with 17 horses and jockeys behind them driving for the stretch run, you probably have more horses than that go down over the top of them.
This is why I have you on, Randy. So you know what I mean? This is point counterpoint. I mean, look, you're making a hell of a point. You really are. And, I don't claim to be the expert in all of this. I'm just a guy that put it on Saturday. And like everyone else in America saying, what constitutes taking a horse down in the Kentucky Derby that had that kind of a trip, that had made that kind of run at the end? Donna's out there with the stick mic and everybody's crying and, and it's raining and it's all that. And 25 minutes later, we got a whole different result. I just, from where I sat, the whole part of it, and 22 minutes of, well, who's deciding and why are they deciding and who are the powers that be and where's, I tweeted, and Randy, you're going to love this. You can go back to my timeline. I said, where's Roger Goodell to settle this when we need him? You know what I mean? That about 15 minutes in, I wanted Roger. I said, the NFL would get this right.
Well, now for everybody out there, I think we've answered the question. The question is, what does a horse have to do to be disqualified in the Kentucky Derby? Just go back and look at the replays of Maximum Security. That is what a horse has to do to get DQ'd in the Derby. Now we know.
Fair enough. Randy Moss joining us here, and you can follow him out on Twitter. You can follow him, of course, all day Friday, Saturday. We've got Black Eyed Susans. We've got Preakness. We've got Drama. We've got Laurel. We've got Pimlico. How much time is NBC going to focus on the empty grandstand that has been decayed? I hope you guys don't do any wire stuff while you're here or whatever, or maybe bring up the corruption of our mayor. We're hurting here, Randy. The baseball team's in last place because, there is no 6th place here in the American League East, and we're on hard times, and you're coming into the city, and I know you've been coming here, for at least half your life for various reasons. I see you football games here and whatnot. I formed this Baltimore Positive thing, and part of this is that the rest of the country probably won't care that the race is at Laurel, and, for what you guys do, it'll be cushier, all of that being said, the horse racing industry won't have to worry about the grandstand falling in, but I am a little worried about the portrayal of all this week, where we have literally part of the grandstand that, has yellow tape over it as a human hazard, literally.
Yeah, well, I'm not really involved with putting the show together, but I think I can tell you with some confidence that we probably won't be discussing the corruption of the Baltimore mayor. Okay, I don't think that's going to be.
We'll save that for the news
Friday
afterwards.
or Saturday. Right. We'll save that for CNN and Fox News.
Thank God for that.
And as far as the portion of the grandstand, that has been condemned, it might well be a mention, but I don't think that that's something that is necessarily going to be dwelled upon. I've been coming here since 1980, and if I can just be frank, the decrepit state of Pimlico has been an issue long before that, long before 1980. I think I might have mentioned it to you last year, Nestor. I came across an article in Daily Racing Form, which is sort of like the horse racing Bible, and it's been that way for a century. And it was discussing how the Pimlico grandstand was dilapidated and it was beyond repair, and the Preakness needed to be moved from Pimlico to Laurel. Nestor, that was 1948.
Well, I'm 28 years on the radio here. Now, Dick Girardi's a dear friend of mine, a Baltimore guy. I've had him on 28 straight Preaknesses, and every year we're like, well, at some point it's going to go, and where the city is right now. We're worried about the baseball team, Randy. The lease on Camden Yards is up in 28 months, and no one's going to the games, and there's no money here to support it. And this is, and I own a sports radio station, so I've been doing this for 30 years. The Preakness would be a bigger deal here, and now that they're trying to sort of move it, there's no movement afoot to make it bigger and better in Baltimore and to save it for Baltimore, other than the bleeding hearts like me. Slots were going to save it, right? The casinos were going to save it. The money was going to save it. And the Stronach family's taking all their money and put it into Laurel. You get out of Laurel, it's beautiful down there. It really is.
Well, the problem with repairing Pimlico to make it a worthy host of the second leg of the Triple Crown is that it would cost a lot of money at this point, and I can't see anybody even coming close to recouping their investment that they would sink into Pimlico. So, I mean, financially, aesthetically, it just makes all the sense in the world to move it from Pimlico to Laurel. I mean, the only drawback that I can see, Nestor, in having the Preakness at Laurel, and hopefully they can find a way to overcome this, and it's a big drawback, and it's something that Joe DeFrancis has mentioned, you lose the entire infield tradition, at least so I'm told, of the Preakness if they hold it at Laurel. Because of drainage ponds, et cetera, there's just no room at Laurel to have the level of fans in the infield, or even maybe fans at all. And I think that is a pretty important part of sort of the tradition of the Preakness, and that's what I would be most bummed about if it moved.
You can follow Randy at Randy_Moss_TV at NBC Sports and the National Football League Network. And, I know it's not football season for you. We got Ravens on our mind around here, but trying to focus on the race that does not have the Derby winners. I do remember Spend the Buck and everything that went on with Garden State back in the day, and, how the Triple Crown purse all became and to be and all of that. Racing without the Derby winner here, racing without a couple of the key horses, there is a case to be made that it's a more interesting race in a lot of ways. A lot of good horses coming here, just not the Derby tops.
Well, there's also a case to be made, Nestor, a strong case to be made, that the time is past due for the scheduling of these Triple Crown races to be changed to reflect the way horses are being trained nowadays. I mean, just think about it. Trust me now, and I've been saying this for 20 years, at some point, people are going to be complaining, and they're going to be saying that the Triple Crown has gotten too easy to sweep. Now, why would that be? Well, it's because too many good horses run in the Derby, lose, and then skip the Preakness. If the Preakness, let's say, were Memorial Day weekend instead of 2 weeks after the Kentucky Derby, you would very likely have Maximum Security, you would have Tacitus, you would still have your Improbable, you would have Code of Honor, you would have War of Will, you might even have Master Finster, the Japanese horse that finished so well at the end of the Kentucky Derby. Heck, you might even have Country House if he bounced back okay in order to make the race in 4 weeks. The Preakness would be a much, much better race every year with all the also-rans, the top also-rans in the Derby, coming back again. And that should be the bottom line, is to ensure that any horse that sweeps the Triple Crown beats the best 3-year-olds out there in all three races.
Randy, what do you love about horse racing right now? Give me the good news in 2019 as you see it. You just spent a muddy day at the Derby, and there's controversy, and there's all this stuff, and Lasix is still, a part of the conversation 30 years later, whatever it is, and I hear that. But, the stuff that bubbles up from the horse racing industry the other 48 weeks of the year when we're not on this circuit, what's good about it outside of the first Saturday in May and everybody getting together?
Well, I mean, obviously, like any sport, and maybe more so than most sports, horse racing is going through a struggle. When you see what happened at Santa Anita with the horse deaths and all the attention that got, and understandably so, you see places like the Preakness and Pimlico in particular being part of a political football in the state of Maryland. I mean, the sport has issues. It definitely does have issues. But it's a sport that's just absolutely dripping with tradition. It's a sport that, honestly, I mean, I've never known someone, Nestor, that made an effort to learn about thoroughbred racing that didn't become a fan. It's a very interesting sport. It's an intellectually interesting sport from a handicapping perspective. These are beautiful animals, some of the most beautiful animals in the world. The people involved are good people, and there's just a lot to like about the sport when you dig into it and you learn something about it. And the sport's going to continue to go through a period of transition. The public needs to be guaranteed that the horses are being taken care of to the absolute best potential of that the sport can can engineer.
By the way, the one thing I'll say, and I'm around the barns once or twice a year, and I'm familiar with the smell. Boy, the people around these animals love these animals. And maybe you could say that in a zoo, you could say that in a circus, you could say that to anybody from PETA, right? Just in that way. But the time I'm around these animals, there's a softness about being around them that makes you feel more human when you're up at 6 o'clock in the morning and seeing the steam coming off them.
I mean, what I always tell people, Nestor, is that the dirty little secret in horse racing is not the care of the horses. It's that the horses are cared for so much better than the people that take care of them. Right? The people that take care of them are a lot of times, live in squalor and they're, struggling to make ends meet. And the horses, by and large, are treated like princes because they're the moneymakers. And they're beautiful animals, and most people involved in this sport are animal lovers.
Anything you want to say about the Ravens before I let you go? Because you are known as a football guy, and I know the draft wasn't your thing last month. We picked up some players. Everybody else picked up some players. We all know the Browns are going to win the Super Bowl, right?
Well, they've sure improved themselves again, that's for sure. Ravens, my primary thing about the Ravens, I'm still skeptical as to whether the whole Lamar Jackson at quarterback, I want to call it an experiment, but
that is an experiment. That's what the organization called it. That to me privately last year. Yes, they used the exact word experiment because that really is what it is. They're 1 out of 32 trying to do this, right?
I'm not sure it has staying power. We'll see. But to me, to succeed in the National Football League on a continuous basis, especially the way the rules are now, that benefits the passing game. I think you just have to have more of a pass-oriented offense than we saw from the Ravens last year in order to consistently succeed in the NFL. That's my opinion. That's why I'm a little skeptical. But I love the Ravens. I'm really a fan of John Harbaugh, and I'd love to see him do well.
Well, I know you're a fan of Baltimore. Don't eat any tourist crab cakes while you're here. You got a friend here if you need some tips, and hope this isn't our last visit to Baltimore. I hope you're not staying down at the Park Hyatt in Washington D.C. next year. You know what I mean?
No, look. I rolled into town yesterday. Within an hour and a half of my arrival, I had already been at the Lexington Market to get Fadley's crab cakes. I don't go for the tourist stuff. I go for the real deal. I already got tacos at Clavel. I'm hitting all my spots. I love coming to Baltimore.
Man, it sounds like you're going to leave heavier than when you came, sort of like what I do at the Derby.
Probably so.
Randy, hit me anytime. Always a pleasure to have you on. Great to have you in our city. We'll be watching all weekend as NBC brings home the stories and paints the pageantry that is the Preakness here in 2019. Great to have you aboard, Randy. Thank you.
Thank you, Nestor. Take care.
Randy Moss, one of the good ones at the NFL Network as well as at the NBC Network in town to do all things Preakness. We're going to be doing Preakness past, present, future. Clem Florio, if you hear his voice from the distance, it's from a 2003 interview. Joe DeFrancis, Gary Stevens, Bob Baffert. Conversations through the years about saving the Preakness, and Bob Ehrlich, our former governor, sitting in my studio talking about slots and super tracks and all that. So I'm playing it all this week just so I don't have to recap it in my own words. I can let the newsmakers tell you in their own words. And anytime I can hear the voice of Clem Florio on one side and the voice of Charlie Ekman on the other, it's a good week in Maryland. I'm Nestor, nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live right here on our Facebook Live, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.